This presentation will cover the first 3 chapters of Jan Homovik's book Intervention. Based on what I have read so far, it seems that the main thrust of this book lives somewhere on the intersection of ludology and electracy, between the hacker and the agent. This book takes up the call to invent electracy. Embracing his identity as a ludic scholar, an amphibious gamer/researcher, Homovik is quick to point out that he is not seeking some foundational objective truth through this project, but rather that he is trying to bring his interests together in a way that is productive. 2 contrasting tidbits of advice that I've received come to mind. One says, your vocation should be something that you geek out about. The other bit of advice suggests that you should not make your hobby your work, for fear that perhaps that it would stop being fun or something like that. I think that perhaps being an amphibian is a good way to go. In the prologue, Ian Bogos calls this particular kind of amphibian noble. Though Homovik steps with confidence in the rhetorical move of blending one's personal and academic interests, I still hear the post-positivist kind of very nearly foundational research methods calling in my head, seeking me to find objectivity. On the other end, I hear Ulmer's call to embrace one's own story and to discover things about themselves through an inherently subjective research process. The reason for doing this, Ulmer tells us, is so that we can continue to define and discover as we use the concept of electracy. Here, and throughout Ulmer's other books, electracy is known in relation to the digital, as the printed is known in relation to the literate. These concepts are based on the idea that society has shifted from an oral culture to a literate culture, and now it is moving towards an electrate culture. In pointing out the different facets of these apparatus, Ulmer points out that the epistemologies, ontologies, and axiologies for all 3 are widely divergent. Whereas in the literate apparatus, reason is of the highest order, whereas in the apparatus of electracy, play takes its place. This perhaps helps us to understand what Homovik's readiness to embrace his amphibious identity is also a demonstration of electrate principles. While for Ulmer, agent is the term which refers to the digital agent, in Homovik's discussion, primacy of this kind is given to the notion of the hacker. To Homovik, the hacker is an inventor. As a virtuoso of computer codes, the hacker invents ways of using technologies and ways of inventing new technologies. The hacker goes beyond being a user. The hacker moves into electracy to invent. The hacker is an active participant in the digital world at large. Code is the hacker's playground. Ulmer, repurposing the concept from Plato, says that Cora is an opportunity for invention. As hackers move through the digital landscape, they have the ability to change it. They have the ability to add to it. In short, they have the ability to invent, to change, and to create. While Homovik's clear handling of complicated theoretical concepts is a major highlight of this book, he also provides a thoughtful history of computers and the development of code. He addresses both of these concepts with a nod towards our star, the hacker. Homovik uses Ulmer's notion of heuretics quite effectively in this book. Heuretics, according to Ulmer, is the practice of learning by doing. Homovik relates this neatly to the hacker who learns to hack by experimenting with code. As with many things, one begins to understand a process when they're thrown into it, and they can begin to play around with the different pieces. Accomplished cooks, or even just experimental home cooks, often play with recipes seeking to understand how changing one aspect or other of the recipe will affect the final product. Homer relates this to the hacker who creates and modifies code, and also to the hacker who puts together a kind of DIY computer set. In each of these instances, the hacker is immersing his or herself into something in order to learn, and importantly, to build on the concept or object by reinventing it. The very act of hacking, according to Homovik, is a way of doing invention. This invention is in the step of being electrate. Homovik points out that the end is not so much interest in the hacker being good or evil, such as hacktivism or some of the hackers featured in the genre that Homovik calls hacker noir, but rather he is most interested, I think, in the hacker ethos as a ludic and electrate agent. Another major thread that this work touches on is the concept of open source code. In the world of intellectual property, there seems to have long been an understanding among hackers that the code they create is open and available for modification by anyone who wishes to mess around with it. This open platform essentially allows anyone that wants to become a hacker to, in fact, become a hacker. The notion of the hacker seems to be rather collegial in this sense, and not barbaric. In fact, Holmovik points out that many hackers operate as a collective in order to further their goals, whatever those goals might be. Overall, I think the main importance of the first 3 chapters of this book are the very clear outline of the theory of electracy, the highlights of computer software, as well as the discussion of hacker culture in general. These ideas all come together to create an interesting commentary about notions of electracy. This work can also perhaps function as an invitation or an intervention inviting the reader to step beyond consuming media and to become a hacker, an inventor, an agent, or whatever you'd call it. Overall, regardless of what we would call it, the society we live in is quickly moving past the literate apparatus. This book, I think, is perhaps most important for its nod toward using electracy as a theoretical construct for a framework that is not necessarily about electracy itself, but rather about an embodiment of it. Stay tuned for the next posting, which will cover the rest of Intervention by Jan Holmovik.